Excuse me. This stoplight and I were wondering if you would like to find out one way that you can improve your cooking across the board. It's really easy, and you probably own it already. This is the one tool that you should be using to elevate your home cooking to another level. In this video, we're gonna look at 3 different recipes and 3 different ways that I think you should be using a thermometer to help change the game in terms of how you make food at home. The first is bread. And when you're making bread, there's really only one instance when you have to use the thermometer, but it's absolutely crucial for the quality of your bread. And that's when you're warming your water to activate your yeast. Yeast is typically best activated at a certain temperature, and it might change depending on the brand of yeast you buy. But the one that I had was from 100 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. If your water's too hot, you might end up killing your yeast. If your water's too cold, your yeast might not end up activating. If you do either of these things, your bread will probably not taste right. It'll be really dense and it won't taste like the fresh bread you buy from the store. So we use our thermometer to measure the temperature of the water when we're making our bread so that we know that our yeast is getting activated at the right temperature. For a simple everyday bread recipe, start by dissolving a half cup of white sugar in 2 cups of warm water. If your water cools off like mine did, I just put mine back over the stovetop to warm it back up to the proper range. Once your water's warm enough, throw in 1.5 tablespoons of active dry yeast. If your yeast isn't completely dissolved after this stirring, that's fine, because it'll dissolve once we let it sit in the water for a while. This process is called blooming, and we're going to let it do that for 10 minutes. While your yeast is blooming, grab the rest of your ingredients, which is 1.5 teaspoons of salt, 1/4 cup of vegetable oil, and 5 to 6 cups of flour. Mix the salt and oil into the yeast and then start adding your flour 1 cup at a time. I didn't end up putting all my flour into the dough while it was on the bowl. I actually saved a cup out for when I was kneading it and incorporated it that way. So fold in what you can with a rubber spatula, and then once you can knead the dough, move it to the counter. Knead it for about 7 minutes. Place it into a greased bowl and flip it over so that the greased side is on the top, and cover it and let it rise for about an hour. After the hour's up, punch your dough down and then knead it for another minute. Then cut it in half and put it in 2 well-greased loaf pans. Bake at 350 for 30 to 40 minutes. Brush the bread with melted butter to give it a nice shine, and let it cool before you eat it. I have a hard time resisting the smell of warm bread, so I had to enjoy a slice right out of the oven. Now let's look at the next way we can use a thermometer to improve our home cooking, which is when you're cooking meat. I tend to think of cooking meat and thermometers as basically being synonymous because whenever I'm cooking meat, I'm using a thermometer to check the temperature. You should be careful with using thermometers on things like steak because you want to make sure that you're not losing all the juice from your meat, and by poking a bunch of holes in your meat, you'll start to lose some of that juice. So you really want to try to do it as few times as possible, but once you do it, it'll really bring up the quality of your meat because you'll know right when it's done, so you're not overcooking it and getting like dry, chalky meat. I didn't shoot any new footage for this meat segment because it's pretty universal. You can use it for any kind of meat that you're cooking. If nothing else, I highly recommend using a thermometer on chicken so that you don't overcook it and have dry meat, but that you're also making sure that it's food safe and ready to eat. Another way we can look at using thermometers to improve our home cooking is with coffee. You might think this is kind of over the top, but when you think about the fact that you can actually scald coffee beans if you boil them, you end up with coffee that's not as flavorful and as rich as it might otherwise be. So by using a thermometer, we make sure that our coffee water is hitting the right temperature so that we're activating our beans in a way that won't remove them of flavor, but is also giving us rich, flavorful coffee that's full of the flavor that we want. Here's how I make a French press coffee. Warm your water up to about 200 degrees Fahrenheit. While this is happening, grind your beans and spoon some into your press. Once your water's reached temp, pour just enough to cover your grounds into your press. And let that sit for a minute to let your grounds absorb the warm water. After that, fill the rest of your press with the hot water. Stir it and let sit for a few minutes. After 3 minutes is up, press the coffee down and then enjoy. I like to add the extra to an insulated mug because the press won't keep it warm. Now, the first is an analog thermometer. It's got the face on it that'll tell you where exactly your temperature is at. It's got a clip so you can clip it to your apron or your shirt. And it's also got a nice sleeve on it listing the done temperatures for meat, casseroles, poultry, beef, pork, all that kind of stuff. Now, this is a probe thermometer, and there's a lot of different kinds of probe thermometers with different features and different costs and different prices. But this is probably the most simple that you get. You probably even have one of these in your house right now and you might not even know it. Just look around in your drawers to see if you can find it, because most homes have a thermometer, but it just doesn't get used enough. This model of a thermometer would probably cost less than $10 at like a supermarket, whereas this one would cost you a little bit more. This is a digital probe thermometer, so we've got the button on the top that turns it on and it just tells you the temperature of whatever you're reading. And this is really nice because it's quick and there's no guesswork. It might be a little harder to read temperatures on a thermometer like this, but this one just tells you what you've got. This thermometer also has Celsius measurements, so you can switch that over. Like this analog thermometer, this digital one also has the temperatures of everything you might be cooking. The benefits of this is that it's super quick, it's super easy to use. I mean, it's also got a nice swivel to it, so if you've got something in an oven that you can't really read very easily, insert it that way. Or if you're looking at something down at a pan, you can tilt it up, like if you're measuring the temperature of sugar as you're caramelizing or something like that, you can do it that way. So this one is a little bit more of a special use case, but this is a candy or deep frying thermometer. It's made of stainless steel, so it's really easy to clean, and it goes up to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, which is really good for things like fry oil, which will often reach temperatures of like 350 or something like that. You can leave this in a pan, which is really nice because it'll be able to withstand those higher temperatures, whereas something like this you shouldn't be leaving in whatever you're cooking. And this has temperatures on it for things like caramel, for sugar, hard crack, soft crack, hardball, softball, and thread. So a bunch of different instructional temperatures for people making candies. I use this thermometer out of all of them the most because it's really easy to use. It's very accurate. It's got temperature to tenths of a degree, so you can be super specific and anticipate when temperatures might be rising. As you can see, it's got a fair bit of use to it. I've left this on burners accidentally, I've boiled it, I've gotten water in it, but it still works, which is really amazing considering the cost. I think this is about a $20 thermometer. The value I've gotten out of it is tremendous. It's definitely paid for itself in terms of the value and money I've saved on correctly cooking food as opposed to burning it or undercooking it. So I've teleported to this location with a new hoodie and not my glasses to kind of sum things up for you. So in cooking, we've got three variables mainly: flavor, texture, and temperature. With flavor, it's pretty easy to change with things like marinades and seasoning. You can change that to your liking. Texture is mainly changed through mode of cooking, i.e. baking versus frying versus sauteing. A thermometer is a tool that will always eliminate that third variable of temperature because we always will know what our temperature will be. That way we can move on to things like seasoning and different modes of cooking, thus building our repertoire and allowing us to expand our skill set in the kitchen. Hey everyone, thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, make sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this. If you didn't, leave a comment below as to what we should work on in the future. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.